Osama bin Laden.
Osama bin Laden.
Bin Laden.
Osama bin Laden.
Osama bin Laden.
Remember, 24 hours ago, it was the Bush tax cut, the Bush budget, the Bush economy. You don't hear any of that tonight. It's America's enemy. America's under attack.
Today I'm joined by Jason Bermas, a researcher and documentary filmmaker who helped create Loose Change, the most downloaded film in internet history. His latest documentary, Fabled Enemies, can be purchased on DVD at Infowars.com or downloaded in high quality at prisonplanet.tv. Jason Bermas, thank you for joining me today on the Corbett Report.
Well, thanks for having me, James.
No problem. Jason, for those of my listeners out there who may not have heard of you before, could you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about how you became a documentary filmmaker?
Sure. Well, I'm just really a regular guy that found out some information, got concerned, got a little bit of opportunity, and turned that into creating documentary films that apparently a lot of people watch online. Basically, I'm from New York. I had not been really politically active. I went to college to be a graphic designer. When 9/11 happened, I pretty much, went along with the official version. Initially, I had a couple of questions, but nothing really stuck with me. It wasn't until about 6 months later when we were talking about war with Iraq that I started to see things and start to think a little bit more critically. And I had somewhat of an awakening. And when I had that awakening, I started, looking into this stuff, and I couldn't believe what I was finding. So, while I was working just regular jobs as a pizza guy on a bar strip and doing graphic design, I was literally burning discs for people, handing them, out Alex Jones's movies, news feeds that I had downloaded. And through that, I actually met Corey and Dylan. After the release of the first Loose Change, which was essentially done by Dylan Avery himself, Corey was really in the military while that was going on. He was in Iraq. And I believe he was in Afghanistan while he was making it as well. They had shot some things together, but it wasn't quite what it was back when Corey and Dylan were talking. So Dylan puts out this documentary, and it has a little bit of a buzz. I meet these guys, and together the three of us put out Loose Change 2nd Edition. And I continued to make documentary films. I produced Loose Change Final Cut, which is a much different film than the 2nd edition, and I just wrote and directed Fabled Enemies, which deals with more of the intelligence ties rather than the physical anomalies we deal with in Loose Change.
Tell the listeners about Fabled Enemies.
Sure. Our previous works really dealt with the controlled demolition of the World Trade Center. It looked a lot at the Pentagon. It looked a lot at the evidence in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, pertaining to the physical anomalies of there not being United Flight 93 being there. What I wanted to do here was show people, well, there's a lot of other concerns too. There's a backstory to all this. And this was an international intelligence mission that included role players, Israeli operatives, Pakistani operatives, members in Saudi Arabia, as well as people within our own government who are part of the continuity of government program. Continuity of government is a really nice word for the shadow government, which was in place on the morning of 9/11 prior to the attacks through drills such as Global Guardian, which was a mass Armageddon attack. I go into the fact that the drills, were going on at the same exact time. They were hijacking drills. There were more hijackers that were really caught that day than the 19 that supposedly died on the flights. I get into United 23 and those quote-unquote hijackers. I really expose how this was, an international op that was done through compartmentalization, and most of the players really didn't have a full spectrum picture of what was going on. But if you look at it, you can see where each had their role. In other words, when I look at the FBI and you're looking at the funding, well, the reason that Robert Wright and others were stopped and Michael Chertoff basically said, I don't want to hear your story because it's a conspiracy theory, and then he's promoted to the head of Homeland Security, is because the people that he was investigating were working with FBI informants. The same thing happened with Abel Danger. And they were actually, government agents. They were probably, people like Atta were probably drug runners for intelligence ops. They were running drills. If you look at the James Wood information I put in this film, how is it that Atta and three of the other hijackers, supposedly hijackers on 4 separate planes, James Woods reveals, gets flagged by the pilot, the stewardess, and James Woods in FAA reports, and nothing is done about these guys 2 months before the attack. It's ludicrous. If somebody like that reported me or you to have suspicious behavior or looked like they were going to hijack the plane, you know that some kind of government agency would follow up on that. So, that's just, a myriad of the things that I go through in this film. I think it leaves little doubt that we've been lied to through the official account. One of the other great things I love to get into is the fact that really the 9/11 Commission is nothing more than a cover-up in a comic book, and it's laughable. I mean, one of the parts I really like in the movie is when I think Thomas Keane has to admit that, all these different agencies did obstruct them, and that in one of the staff statements he said it was an indictment of the FBI and other agencies. And him and Lee Hamilton, the other head of the commission, just sit there and laugh about it like it's a big joke. Well, it's not a big joke to me.
Jason Bermas, if Fabled Enemy has one message or one point that you'd like to get across, what would that be?
I think the one message that I'd like to get across in Fabled Enemies is that, right now what we are fighting is a fabled enemy, an enemy that can never be beat, an enemy that doesn't really exist, one which gives the government or the powers that be or the establishment carte blanche to almost do anything to us in our society, and that is extremely dangerous. And I think it's up to us to put down the remote control, to put down the iPhone, and hold these people accountable, to restore, not we need a restoration of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights in this country. We don't need a revolution. We have to bring these people to justice, through the law, through this country. I don't think an international tribunal is going to help us any. I think that would, make us look even worse. I think that would be a tool to bring about world government. So the one thing that I really want to press to people is that we have to wake up to this fabled enemy, and we have to hold the real enemies accountable.
Well, let's talk about some solutions to these problems. You mentioned bringing people to justice. What is 9/11 justice, and how do you think we'll be able to achieve that?
Well, in my little perfect world, I would like to give subpoena power to the families that initially started the 9/11 Commission. I mean, for those that don't know, it was over 400 days before the commission even started, and it was only because of the pressure of the Jersey Girls and others to get this commission going. So why don't we let them have subpoena power? They can call these people into an open forum that's covered by the national news, whether it be C-SPAN or otherwise, it should be covered, globally. And they ask them questions, and they have to be accountable for those actions. And when they lie, they have to be accountable and charged with perjury. And this isn't going to be just a big, everybody's going to get pardon fest. We have to then show the world that we want to bring these people to justice, and then they should be punished accordingly. That's what we really, really need to do in this country. And we need to repeal things like the Patriot Acts 1, 2, 3 is really here. We need to get rid of Homeland Security. And we have to restore personal freedom again and personal responsibility.